Now, this video, we're not going to talk about things like doing your due diligence and ensuring that your documentation is in place and you have a contract and going to the lawyers and checking a lands commission. No, we are not checking any of those things. We are assuming that you have already done that and you have a choice, right? You have more than one land in two places to purchase. And so you are looking out for, how do I make a decision on whether to buy the land which is on the hill, or to buy the land which is in the valley, or to buy the land which is on the plain land. Okay, so on a good Saturday, my good friend and I decided to go and look for land to buy, because land is a very good investment. Even if you're not going to build, it's an investment which is going to appreciate with time, provided you've done all your due diligence. And so we went to Ashifla, where my good friend Ishmael has built his house, and I have a video on that. So if you haven't yet watched, I'm going to leave a link in the description below. And when we went to Ashifla, he showed us two different places, right, where the land was being sold at. And the price was the same. So one was way up on a hill, and the other was in a low-lying area. One was by the main road, and the other was a bit inland. The one which was inland was next to a place where they intended to build a school, like a university. And the one which was by the main road was one on a low-lying area. Two, the road was tarred and everything. The one which was closer to the university didn't have a good road network. And so we looked at this and decided to make this video to help other people who want to make a decision on the best way to decide which one to go for. So the very first thing is to check the land when it is raining or it has rained heavily. Now, the reason this is very important is because it's going to give you an idea of the kind of flooding you are going to experience when it rains, right? So one, is it a land which is prone to flood? If you buy this land and it rains heavily as it does in Ghana and Accra, will the land flood? And if it floods, it also tells you that when you move in eventually, you might face flooding issues. Secondly, if it floods, it means that getting access to the land for your contractors who are going to be building and for conveying or transporting your materials is also going to be a bit of a challenge. And thirdly, if it floods, it means that your building you are going to put up might sink eventually, right? And so you need to look out for some of the things you are going to do if you decide to build a land which is going to flood, like putting a lot of materials on the land to solidify it before you even dig your foundation and all those things. So you need to look out for the kind of land you are buying when it is raining. Next, let's look at the terrain or the topography of the land. Now, like I said, we had the choice of buying a land which was up on the hill and one which was on the low-lying area. For me, I always prefer the land which is on a hill because, one, it's less likely to flood, right? And especially the area we went to look at has a lot of heavy rainfall. So there's definitely going to be an issue of either flooding or waterlogging, etc. And if you're buying a land on a hill, it's less likely to flood. But it's not all rosy when you do decide to buy land on a hill, because the land on a hill is also going to be one steep to navigate. Like if you are conveying your materials, your cement, your blocks, etc., the vendors or the merchants may not even want to go that far, especially if it's a very rocky, mountainous area. And two, your workers may also not be too enthused going all the way up on a hill to build for you. And three, even clearing the land is going to be very difficult. And four, you need to consider like the nature of the slope and the angles, because that's also going to determine like the structure of the house you're finally going to put up and the design of the house you're going to put up. It's very, very important. So you need to consider all these if you do decide to go for a land on a hill. Some people will just prefer a plain land. It's easier to dig, easier to navigate, easier to access and all that. Let me know your thoughts, which you prefer and why, in the comments below. Next, if you have like two options or more than one option, and you need to consider the access to electricity, unless of course you want to live completely off grid. But if you're going to be relying on the national grid, you need to check how far away are the electrical poles from your land, right? Unless you are buying a land which is already titled and which has access to electricity, those are the best, but usually they are more expensive. But if you don't have that kind of land, you need to consider how far away is the nearest electricity source and how many poles do you need to be able to reach your house, right? Because the farther it is, the more poles you are going to buy, the more wires, and the more it's going to cost you. But if there's already development going and people have already pulled the lines, then it means that it's a no-brainer. So you need to consider all those if you are selecting a choice of land. And that leads me to the next point where we look at the source of water. Because when you are building, you're going to need water for your concrete works and your plastering and everything. So how far away is the nearest source of water, or how easily accessible is a source of water? Unless, of course, you do decide that you are going to be drilling a borehole for your water. And if that is the case and you are going to be drilling a borehole, you need to consider if the land will give you good water when you drill. Will you even get access to water? So you need to consider all these things. And the one which has like a closer source of water may be the better option. It might not always be the best option, but it may be the better option. And especially if there's like a pipeline leading to the national water system. Excellent. If all these things don't work, then you may need to consider harvesting water or buying water from the tankers to be able to complete your building project. And after you've moved in and you need to live, you need water to live, right? So how easy is it to access water? The next point you need to consider is security. How far away are you from your neighbors? How isolated is the land? Especially considering if there's any development we're going, how advanced are the building projects around you? Will they be ready by the time you're going to be ready, or you're going to be just isolated, living somewhere in the bushes all alone, right? You need to consider the security. You need to talk to the locals. You need to find out the reputation of the locals. You need to find out if like there's a lot of crime in the area and things like that. You need to ask the pertinent questions to ensure that you don't put yourself and your loved ones at risk. Also, you need to ask yourself, is the area prone to like land guard activities and litigation activities and all those? If it is, you may just want to avoid it, because people have lost their lives, people have been injured because of activities of land guards, etc. The third point is, how close is a good hospital from your source of land or your building project, right? Because if you have a family, you have a wife, a kid, a husband, etc., and anybody falls sick at midnight or in the middle of the night or when it's raining, how long do you need to drive or walk to the nearest hospital? You need to consider all these things, right? So if you have a choice of two lands, one is pretty close to a hospital, one is not, you might want to go for the one which is pretty close to a hospital or a clinic. If your wife or sister or brother decides to give birth, can your brother give birth? Like, if anybody is in trouble, how soon can you get to a hospital? That could be the difference between life and death. And so you need to consider all these things. And that also leads me to the next point. How close is it to like an educational facility, like a school? A really, really good school, especially if you have kids. Or do you have to drive like an hour or 2 hours to the nearest school? If that's the case, who is going to pick up the kids from school, after school, and all those things? You need to consider all those before you build or you select that particular choice of land. The eighth point is, you need to know the plan for not just your house or your street, but you need to know the plan for the area. If you know the plan, it will help you to make a good informed decision about which of the lands to go for. Let me give you an example. Will there be a university going to be built in that area? Usually when there's a university going to be built, it informs you about the kind of projects that you need to put up. You can put up like a hostel facility or a residential facility. Is there going to be like some huge office spaces going to be built in the area? Is there a plan to have like a huge mall close to your land? Then it means your land is going to appreciate in value very, very soon. Is there an airport going to be built in the area? Those things increase the value of the land and the area you find yourself. So you need to find out what the government's plan is and what the private sector plans are for that area. Is there going to be a road network which is going to link major cities and stuff like that? You need to consider all those, because if the road is constructed because of a major university, then the value of the land is really, really going to appreciate. So you need to look at the future value of the land based on the plan for the area, and not just the current value of the land. Today, it might look like bushes, but people did the same mistake and didn't buy lands at Spintex and North Legon and other places because they were bushes 10, 20 years ago. But today, those places are selling for $500,000 and more. So you need to consider all those things very carefully. Before we move to the ninth point, if you haven't yet liked this video, can we get 100 likes? So it tells me that you are interested in such content. And if you haven't yet subscribed, kindly subscribe for more amazing content. You need to look at the quality of the road network, which kind of leads into the previous plan, right? So look at the future value of the road network and the current value of the road network. The current value, because you are going to convey materials, you are going to convey construction workers to your building project. How terrible is the nature of the roads leading to the place currently? And so you need to consider all this, especially yourself if you are going to be driving to the land for supervision works and all that. You might spoil your car, and if you move in and the land is not constructed in a very long time, you have to be replacing your shocks, and all these things are a bit of an inconvenience. So look at the current value and the future value of the road networks. Really, really, really important. And this brings me to my last and final point, which is the price of the land. So after you have looked at all the other 9 points I've given, the last point is to look at the price of the land. Is the land that you are being sold really worth it? How do you determine if it's worth it or not? Based on all the 9 points I've given you above, consider that and negotiate. Make sure you do your research well, make sure you do your due diligence well, make sure you have all your documents in place, and leave your own tips below for considering the best quality land to select and what to look out for when purchasing land in Ghana or any country where you're watching from. Also comment the country you're watching from. Thanks for watching. If you watch to this point, you are just amazing. And so leave a comment that I watched to this point. Right.